Welcome to Journalist Roundtable. I'm Phil Beckman. Today we're joined by Quincey Reese, a reporter with the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review, Sarah Hofius Hall, a reporter with WVIA, and Maddie Hanna, a reporter with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Now, we are focusing on education this week at PCN. Maddie, last Monday, the PA House approved an education bill, House Bill 2370. Tell us about that bill. What would it do?
So this bill would really overhaul the way Pennsylvania funds public schools. It solidifies a recommendation from the Basic Education Funding Commission that would inject a lot more money into schools that are deemed underfunded under this new adequacy measure, which is basically looking at what successful school districts that are meeting state performance targets, what they're spending, and how much they're spending per pupil, and trying to raise other districts up to that same level. So over 7 years, I mean, this would be setting targets for the state to meet over 7 years that would ultimately bring spending up to more than $5 billion above where it is currently. So this would be a really big infusion of money and a change in how the state has been distributing education aid to schools.
Now, the House is controlled by the Democratic Party, and the bill now goes to a Senate controlled by the Republicans. Any sense or any word from the Republicans about how they're responding?
Yeah, I mean, it seems, they say they're working on the final number for the increase. So unclear exactly what prospects this bill has. Republicans have certainly been wary of committing to a 7-year plan, something this large. And I certainly expect some resistance to the magnitude, I guess, of this proposal.
Sarah, you've been covering education for a long time. Are you seeing any trends over the years of certain issues that keep coming up or new issues that are arising?
Definitely. I mean, funding. Funding is the number one issue that we see all of the time. Our school districts, they have quite a few here in the Northeast, are severely underfunded. And so that affects everything from teacher pay to buildings not being up to where they should be. I've covered cuts to art programs and music programs, and everything always comes back to funding, which then if there isn't enough state funding in the budget, that comes back to local taxpayers. So, time and time again, we've heard from so many local taxpayers who can't afford to pay their property tax bills anymore. So it's just such a local community-based issue.
Now, Quincey, you've been writing about one of these local issues at the Penn Trafford School Board, just recently raised property taxes. Tell us about that and what were they thinking?
Yeah, so when the initial budget was first proposed, they were actually proposing a three mil increase for taxes, and that did not end up getting passed. The board had initially in their preliminary budget approved a 2 mil increase, and then when they went to vote on the final budget a week or so ago, they ended up going with a 1 mil increase. And that was sort of contested among board members, 6-3 in favor of the increase. Two of the folks who opposed it didn't feel that it was a high enough millage increase to support the district financially, and one was just against increasing taxes at all. That's something that we've seen. Or increasing the millage rate. That's something that we've seen at other local school districts as well, like Hempfield School District, also in Westmoreland County. And part of that is, rising costs, increasing teacher salaries in some cases, but also just part of it is losing some pandemic funding. ESSER funds are now starting to run out. And so school districts are trying to figure out how to work around that, including Penn Trafford.
Now, Maddie, part of the education bill is a component that looks at cyber charter school funding, and it changes how they're funded from the per student rate. How would that work if this bill is passed?
So this would be a really big change. It would set a flat rate of what school districts pay cyber charter schools for each student that leaves a district and enrolls in the cyber charter at $8,000 per pupil. Currently, cyber charters are receiving or districts pay somewhere between $8,600 and more than 20,000, I believe 26,000 per pupil, depending on what school district the kid is coming from, because school spending varies so widely between different districts in Pennsylvania. More affluent communities are able to raise more in local property taxes. That's led to really, big gaps in both what local school districts are spending on their own students and what they are paying cyber charters for the students that enroll from them. So this would set a flat rate that's lower than what the charters are currently receiving. There's other components of this proposal that are aimed at different accountability and transparency measures, but that rate cut would supposedly save school districts more than $500 million next year. And I mean, that's also $500 million less that the cyber charter schools would be receiving.
Sarah, one of the programs that you've written about that has recently had some funding reduced is the SHINE program. What is that program and why was its funding reduced?
So the SHINE program is part of the 21st Century Grant Program. So it's a federal program, and the state distributes the funding. So this last round, according to the Department of Education, they had so many applications that they only had only about half of those who applied received funding. But the SHINE program here in Northeast Pennsylvania has been going on for quite some time. It's an after-school program where students receive help with homework. They have mentors. They, get out time outside. They work on STEM projects. They even get dinner before they go home. So it's a really worthwhile program to students who are from school districts that maybe aren't performing as well as they should be. So just in Luzerne County, there are 500 students who participate in these programs after school. And as of right now, they don't know if these programs will continue in the fall.
Is there an effort to appeal these decisions and try to continue the funding?
Yes. So SHINE program, and it's in other counties besides Luzerne as well. But all of the leaders are appealing, through the state process, and also looking for funders outside of public money as well, like different foundations, other supporters.
Now, Quincey, you've been writing about an issue that probably is statewide, even national-wide, and that's a teacher shortage. And you write that thousands of teaching positions in Pennsylvania were vacant or filled by somebody on an emergency certificate in the past year, leaving education across the state in a crisis mode. How serious is this issue around Pennsylvania?
It's definitely serious. According to data released by the state Department of Education, there are 2,156 vacancies in the teaching profession in K-12 schools across the state. And, some of these teachers that are teaching in schools are doing so on an emergency certification. A coalition called PA Needs Teachers that's been advocating for more people to go into the profession in Pennsylvania reported that there are 15,000 teachers needed statewide, not only to make up for those 2,000 plus vacancies, but also account for the teachers that are working with an emergency certification. People from experts from PA Needs Teachers have said that emergency certifications are a possible solution. They can kind of help schools fill some of those vacant spots, but it's not a long-term solution in that these folks, they have expertise in the topic that they're teaching, but they don't necessarily have that teaching pedagogy background. And so that's kind of where that 15,000 figure came from, is combining the vacancies and the emergency certifications. And it was Laura Boyce from Teach Plus Pennsylvania, an education support nonprofit that referred to the teacher shortage as a statewide crisis that needs to be looked at comprehensively across Pennsylvania in order to come to a solution.
Sarah, is this teacher shortage, is this an issue that is being felt in the area that you cover?
Oh, definitely. Definitely an issue in Northeast Pennsylvania. And one of the things that's been interesting to cover is what some groups are trying to do to combat this shortage. Local universities are starting pipeline programs where they're inviting students as young middle schoolers in so they can learn more about the profession and learn from teachers, shadow teachers in their own schools, and then hopefully pursue that after they graduate. There's another program actually run by Keystone College where people who maybe have a bachelor's degree in something else can go and become emergency certified and pursue a teaching degree at the same time. So they may take classes on the weekends or at night, but get that real world experience at the same time and ease the shortage.
Maddie, teacher pay is a perennial issue, and it comes up whenever we have the budget process, and there are many components to that. And you've written about one aspect of it, which is that you wrote about that there's a lawsuit alleging that Central Bucks underpaid more than 350 female teachers, and that's coming up for a trial. Can you tell us about that issue?
Yeah, this was a case that began with one and then two female teachers saying that they had been underpaid compared to male counterparts, and it's several years ago, and it's expanded into a collective action case where female teachers were allowed to opt in. There's now more than 350 plaintiffs, dating back to people who were employed by the district as far back as 2000. And they claim more than $100 million in damages. It's something that's shaping up to be a really complex issue for the district in terms of cost, and that the trial is likely going to focus on if it gets to trial, if there isn't a settlement beforehand, but who the comparisons are. Does Central Bucks have justification that it can clearly explain for why certain teachers were placed at higher rates on their pay scale than others? And this is something that is being watched by other school districts, given just the implications for other communities that may have male and female teachers placed at different rates on their scales.
Now, Quincey, Sarah talked about some of the things that are being done in her area to try to produce more teachers. What are you seeing as you've been looking into this topic? What types of actions are being taken to try to address the teacher shortage issue?
Yeah, so one of the key solutions that's being done right now are these grow your own programs, as they're calling them. The Allegheny Intermediate Unit has a partnership with Point Park University in Pittsburgh that supports 42 school districts kind of surrounding the Pittsburgh public schools. And it's this program called Bridge Up, which allows people who are currently working in schools, oftentimes as paraprofessionals, to pursue a teacher certification while they're still working as a paraprofessional or another role in a school. And this kind of solves that issue of, oh, do I just take time off work and not get paid in order to become a teacher? Or, how do I do that? This program allows them to continue their job and pursue this 2-year program kind of at night after they're done with their day job. And the program is completely paid for by whatever district they teach at. So that's one solution that's been going on in the Pittsburgh area. And another solution, kind of looking at people who are still in the K-12 school system, is the Central Westmoreland Career and Technology Center's Aspiring Educators Program. This allows students in, I think, about 10 to 12 school districts in Westmoreland County to give teaching a try when they're still in high school, completely free of charge, very low stakes. They do the first half of their school day at their regular school, and then they go to the technology center for the second half of the day to take some education related classes, kind of exposing them to classroom management and pedagogy and things of that nature. We've seen that draw in, I believe it was 12 students for the first year, and looking into the fall, they've almost they've more than doubled that participation. So both of those are two of the key efforts in the Pittsburgh corner of the state. But another solution is this student teacher stipend program that was signed by Governor Shapiro last year. It's a $10 million allotment that will support college students who are looking to pursue a student teacher placement in the 24 to 25 school year. Now, this would give each student teacher $10,000 to support them in that time, where most universities encourage students not to be working a second job when they're student teaching, just to focus on the demands of the student teaching placement. So that's kind of what that funding is meant for. The primary issue is that of the 3,800 students who have applied for it, only 600 students are going to be able to actually receive that stipend, because it is currently allotted $10 million.
Maddie, you wrote
I would just,
go ahead.
I would just add one thing too about when we're talking about teacher shortage and teacher pay, that I think there's going to be a real issue with when we talk about big increases in education funding. Part of the goal is to allow school districts to, especially underfunded districts, to hire more staff and to reduce class sizes and provide more supports to students. And with the current supply levels where they are, there's only going to be more demand for teachers in Pennsylvania going forward. So these kinds of programs that Quincey is talking about, I think are going to become even more important going forward.
Yeah, and just off that, every time a local school district here wants to start a new program, one of the things that is always talked about, will we actually find the staff for it? Can we find the teachers in whatever specialty they're looking at? And sometimes they can't.
Well, Sarah, you wrote about another challenge, which is about finding students. There's since COVID, you report that there's been an increase in truancy issues. Talk a little bit about that. What's causing that?
Yeah, so the superintendents from throughout the region all told me that, for at least 2 years, they told students stay home. And, if you have a sniffle, stay home. So kids kind of forgot that, and parents too, that going to school every day is something you need to do. And so they almost have to retrain students and families on the importance of daily attendance. So at the magisterial court level, both Lackawanna and Luzerne County, the number of cases referred to the court has doubled since the 18-19 school year. So that would be like the last kind of normal school year before the pandemic. So now they're all looking at solutions, either new policies, just even starting new programs to try to get kids excited and wanting to be in the classroom every day.
Maddie, you wrote a story about how the Democratic-led Central Bucks School Board announced that they won't challenge a past GOP majority's decision to offer $700,000 separation pay to a previous superintendent. Tell us a little bit about that. $700,000, that's a lot of money for a separation pay.
Yeah, this caused a huge debate in the community when it was announced. This happened in November, early December. In the days after the school board elections, the Central Bucks School Board changed hands. Democrats swept the 5 open seats and gained a majority on the board, and the superintendent, Abram Lukabaugh, had announced just days after the election that he'd be resigning, effective immediately. And the board, in the lame duck period, still led by Republicans, gave him approved a separation agreement of $700,000. That included $315,000 that was matching his salary, which the board had increased his salary by 40% just that summer, up to $315,000. So it was reflecting that new salary level. And then about $300,000 in compensation for primarily unused sick days, as well as unused vacation time. So people were really upset about this. The new board, vowed that it would challenge this, but they've now announced some 6 months later that they don't see a clear legal path to recouping any of that money, so that's going to go unchallenged.
Quincey, you've written about some leadership issues in some of the schools in your area where there's seems to be a shifting around of principals from different schools. Why is that happening, and how did the community react?
Yeah, so at Penn Trafford School District in Westmoreland, there are five principals that are being shifted to different schools. Most of those are elementary school principals. And one is was a high school assistant principal who's being moved back down to the elementary level. And the district has kind of explained, the superintendent explained to me, this is a move to kind of generate fresh leadership perspectives and things of that nature. Parents have not taken very kindly to all of these changes. Several have come out and expressed their concerns at board meetings over the last month or so, just kind of mostly surrounding, how is this going to affect our kids? Is this change going to negatively impact them, negatively impact test scores, things of that nature? And the school board has remained pretty quiet about it. They have not really released any additional information about the reasoning for the changes, but they have assured parents that there will be an open house later in the summer to kind of meet their new principal and shift into that change and be more acquainted with their new principal come the fall.
Sarah, you were writing about issues of mental health and how some of the schools in your area were addressing that with therapy dogs. How has that worked, and how did the kids respond?
Yeah, I have to say this was a great assignment to go on to spend time with these therapy dogs. But during the pandemic, the mental health became something that was really talked about and is still being talked about in schools more than ever before. So a growing number of schools in this region have full-time therapy dogs, almost on staff. Usually their handler is one of the school counselors. So these dogs come to school every day. They greet students at the door. If there's a student who maybe has some anxiety issues about coming into the building, the student will walk that dog to class and spend time with that dog just to make sure that the student is okay for the day. So it's really, it's growing, and students love it, and even the staff loves it too.
So it does seem that since COVID, there's been much more of an emphasis on mental health. Maddie, are you seeing that as well? Are you seeing the schools both with their staff as well as with students?
Yes, I think that, one area where school districts would like to hire, especially if they get more funding, is they've talked about counselors and more of those kind of supports in buildings, which they don't feel they have enough of currently. It's a huge issue.
I think also as the ESSER funding disappears, it will be really interesting to see how school districts handle that, because a lot of them use some of that funding for mental health resources for students. And so, students have become really reliant on that. And so I think to take it away would be really hard. So it will be interesting to see where they find that funding.
Quincey, are you seeing a concern for mental health out in your region as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I know at several local school districts, there's been efforts in the past year or so to increase mental health support. I know that Penn Trafford, part of their comprehensive plan that they passed last year was very much surrounding mental health, and how do we make sure that all students belong. And part of that focus was also on students in special needs classes with IEPs and things of that nature. Trying to make sure that they feel integrated into their school district, but also that they have opportunities to kind of branch out into the community and pursue work opportunities early on. So yeah, definitely to echo what both Sarah and Maddie have said, mental health is absolutely a key priority for lots of our local school districts out here.
So we only have a couple of minutes left, but Sarah, I just wanted to talk quickly about one more topic that you wrote about, which is the issue of literacy. How significant are literacy, or are teachers seeing this as an issue or challenge for them?
Definitely. I think in a post-pandemic world, it's really important to focus on some of those basics. The Scranton School District went through a lot of turmoil over this last decade. Teachers worked, I think it was 6 years under an expired contract. The district went through the state recovery process. So a lot of programs were cut, and they're finally now at a place, they're out of recovery, where they can really focus on what kids really need. So the American Federation of Teachers, their president, Randy Weingarten, was in Scranton a couple weeks ago. She met with students, she met with teachers, and so the National Union pledged its support in greater literacy training for all of Scranton's teachers.
Sarah, what are you going to be covering this week?
The state budget. And also I want to do some work on cyber charter schools too.
Maddie, what are you going to be looking at?
Yeah, similarly, the state budget is a big priority. We're going to be watching if there's a push as well for a school voucher program when the Senate returns this week or this coming week.
Quincey, what stories will you be looking at?
Yeah, not to echo what everyone said, but absolutely state budget is a big part of it. Part of that, we're looking to see if there's any move to increase the amount allotted to the student teacher stipend program. I know that folks from PA Needs Teachers have told me that they'd need about $75 million to fully support the 5,000 to 6,000 students that will be student teaching in the 2024 to 25 school year. So that's something we'll be looking at as well. And also, I want to take a look at school vouchers, what that means to private schools, religious schools, but also how that's maybe impacting public K-12 schools as well.
Our guests have been Quincey Reese, a reporter with the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, Sarah Hofius Hall, a reporter with WVIA, and Maddie Hanna, a reporter with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thank you all for joining us. And I'm Phil Beckman. Thank you for watching.